Hi community! I did a stream yesterday on ways to get started with ML.net and start contributing to the repo. Unfortunately the stream was not recorded, so I thought I wanted to do a second recap video here to just show you the highlights of what we did yesterday, because I think we had some really cool stuff that we were able to complete. So the first thing I want to show you today is how you get started building the repo and how you get started contributing with your own suggestions. So if we go here to the ML.net repo for machine learning, we see we have all the things we usually find in open source repo. But if you scroll down here, you'll find guidance for contributing to the repo. All the way here, contribution guide. If you click on that one, you can easily navigate to the developer's guide here at the bottom of the page. The developer's guide is going to contain all the instructions you need to download, fork this repo, and have all the necessary components installed so you can start building a solution and contributing to it today. The things I wanted to point out here first of all is that you need to have Visual Studio 2019 installed, and not only that, you also need to have certain compartments here. So if we go to the Visual Studio installer here, we can have a quick look on what things we need to have installed to make sure this works. So let's wait for this one to start real quick here. Perfect, we got it right here. So if we go and modify here, we can then get a good visualization on things we need to have installed. The things you need to make sure you have installed are the ASP.NET and web development package. You need to have the desktop application with C++, because there are some C++ components. And you will also need the .NET Core cross-platform development package here, or module, or workload I guess they're called, as this is important for building the solution. So make sure you have those three workloads installed. Once you have those three workloads installed, you then want to make sure you download CMake. And CMake is going to be used when we actually build the solution. You can just go to this website here, cmake.org/download, and just download the MSE installer for Windows if you're using Windows, or your equivalent for Linux or iOS, depending on what you prefer. So once you have those components installed, you have all the necessary tools on your computer to make this work. What you then do is go to the repo and click on fork. Forking it is going to get it to your local machine, and you can see here that I've already forked it to myself, which is necessary to get this to work. Once you've forked it, you can open up the solution in Visual Studio, as we've done right here, and we can see we have all the source code. But before you start building the solution and getting it to work, you need to make sure you can build it using the necessary instructions on the site here. So if we go back to the developer guide, we can follow the instructions right here. These three components here, or commands, are necessary to execute to get this to work. The first thing you want to do is open a Windows terminal or a command prompt or PowerShell, whatever you prefer, and navigate to where you have your forked repo. In my case, I have forked and cloned my forked repo to Git Machine Learning, which is my own fork here. And if we look at this, we can see we have all the necessary files here. I have already executed git submodule update init here, so that should be all good. And what I can do now is, if I want to build it in release mode or in debug mode, I can just execute this command. And you see here that we have build.cmd here, which is going to be executed and used when we build this application. So if I do that and go on build cmd, debug, hit enter here, we're going to see that this doesn't work. Well, that's great. Actually, I need to open a command prompt here, so let's do that. And we'll go to Git Machine Learning, and let's try this again. So build.cmd, and we'll copy that in, and we'll change this to debug, and keeping our fingers crossed that this works this time. Perfect. So we see here that we already have our tools initialized, and that's because I've already run this one time before. If you do it the first time, this will take a bit longer, so you probably have to wait about 5 to 10 minutes the first time you build this to make it work. But after that it's much quicker. And you can see now we're just doing a NuGet restore for all these packages in here, so the things you would normally see when you do the solution. And once you've done this, you can actually build the solution as well and run tests from the Visual Studio IDE as regular. So we switch back to the IDE here. We see here to the right that we have directories for the code. So we have one directory for the source code here, and you can kind of recognize some of these projects. If you have used the library before, you will see things like ML data, where you have the data view, core for some core functionality of course, as well as different projects for different ML tasks, such as fast tree, image analytics, and those kind of things. So you will probably feel fairly right at home here looking at these things. So to get started contributing to this repo, we also picked just an issue to get started with. And what we did yesterday on yesterday's stream was that we went to the repo right here and went on issues. If you do that, you'll be presented with 429 issues as of the current date, and that can be fairly overwhelming. If you just look at some of these titles or headlines here, it can be difficult to understand what we need to do, especially for someone like me that just started contributing to this repo. I found it very easy and useful to go on labels here and just search for up for grabs or good first issue. Good first issue is a label designed to have like newcomers like me to get started. So if you look at good first issue here, let's see, we can find a couple of them here right here to get started with, about 6 or 7. The one we chose yesterday was this one right here, 2642, read from text file, cannot load data as key type. So let's look at this one and what changes we did yesterday to make this work. The issue here is that when you use the text loader or create a text loader to read a CSV file or tab limited file, you can't necessarily define the key type and the key type count on a schema. So for example, if you have a column with a given number of different values, so you have a cardinality of let's say 10, which means you have 10 different kinds of values in that column, you are not able to currently make MLNet aware of that fact using the create text loader. So when you define this on your schema, it's not respected. So that's the issue here. And currently there's other methods that do similar things in MLNet that actually respect this. So we want to go ahead and do that as well. And there's some really useful and helpful guidance here from Eric and other people in the team. So if you scroll down here, we see that right here, we see that Eric has commented that's still a valid issue, and the method we're using is called load from text file now. And the change we are supposed to do is in the text loader CS file about line 1444. So if you go to the text loader CS file here and go to this line, we end up in this method right here. So internal static text loader create text loader. And what this does is that it takes the normal parameters that we're used to when we're trying to load something from a text file, such as headers, separators, allowing quotes, and those kind of things. And it reads those different properties of a schema, and it creates those columns that we need for our data view. And if you scroll down here, we see that it does a lot of things here. And eventually what it's going to do here, it's going to loop over each member info using reflection, meaning it's going to loop over each property in the schema, right? And for each of those properties in the schema, it's going to fetch things as the load column attribute, which if you remember is the index of the column, and also going to try to figure out what kind of type this data is. So is this a boolean, is this a single, or something else? And it's going to set that on the corresponding column we are creating right here. So in our case here, what we want to do is that we currently are not setting something called key count. Key count. So we need to set the key count to something right here. And the key count, again, is going to contain exactly that. It's going to contain a count here, which is u long. And that's going to be the cardinality of the data. So for example, if you look at breast cancer data, one of those columns there is going to be thickness of a lump, and it's going to be measured between 1 and 10. So the thickness can have a value between 1 and 10, that's a range. So the cardinality of that column is then 10. So we want to be able to set that and make sure m_that knows that this is the cardinality that we can potentially have. And we use the key count to do so. Perfect. So how do we solve this problem? Well, it's actually pretty simple. What we do is, and we can do it right here, is that we try to find that attribute on the schema class, just like we do with a load column attribute. So we can say here key count attribute, and we can fetch that in a similar fashion as we do with the other attributes here by member info dot get custom attribute and key type attribute, right? And if we decrease this one, you will see it better. So given that this attribute is actually not required on the schema, is depending on the column type, right? We have to just check here is the key count attribute equals not null. If it's not null, if it's there, then go ahead and set it on the column. And what we do then is key count attribute, key count, and that's everything we need to do. So to solve this problem in this issue, this was a pretty simple issue to solve. Once we figure out what key count really means, once we actually have a look at the code and those kind of things. This took us about 1.5 hours yesterday, so yes, we did this in a few minutes here, but just know that it takes a while to get started with the code and understand. But these up for grabs issues are perfect for this kind of case, because the solution generally is pretty simple, so you just have to figure out where to do the change and how things are linked together, and eventually you get there. But like any code issue or any resolution in your general life, you also need to have unit tests. So what we did is that we also went around and fixed the unit tests, or added new scenarios for this case here. And the best way to do that, of course, is to try to figure out where this method is used. In our case here, we can see that it's used from the create text loader method right here. And if you look at the tests here are passing, we can kind of go to one of these scenarios. We can also just press Shift F12, and we'll find that we have some text loader test right here that seems to be unit tests. And that's correct actually. So we have a text loader test class here, which has unit tests for the different scenarios. It currently tests things like I have no public properties on my schema, I have different kind of decorations and attributes, and they should then respect different things. I have no load column index and those kind of things. So this seems to be a perfect place for us to go about our business. So what we want to do here is that we want to add a test here, 1 or 2, that checks that if we set the key type count on the schema, we actually also set that on a column that is going to be underneath. So we can do a public void test, for example, sets key type count on column right now. It's a poor name, but that's what we're going to start with right here. And in general, the things and the steps we need to do to get this to work is, first of all, we need to fetch data and load it. Second of all, we need to assert the schema to make sure the key count is actually what we set it to be. So to find a good data source to do this, we can actually go and look at the different data sources that these tests currently use. And if we look at just a simple test right here, you can see they have a method called getDataPath. And they define test data sets here with different names. For example, we have iris data and we have other things. And it turns out that this data is stored in a folder here under the repo called test data. And we have different kinds of data structures available for us. The one we picked yesterday was the breast cancer one. Given those definitions I said before, because what we have here is we have the label, which is bad or is good, I guess, plus the clump thickness and different things here. But each of these properties here, they have a value between 1 and 10. So the cardinality is 10, which means that the key count should be 10. So this is a perfect data set for us to get started with. So what we can do here is we can use this data by going into our test. And let's go back to the test here. We can create our own schema first of all. So public class, we'll do breast cancer input model, and we will call this is the label, right? So this is what we try to predict. It's a boolean, and we'll just add one more column for the thickness, so like that. And as we do with schemas in envelope.net, we need to have load column attributes on these to make sure that we know which index it is. So this is the first one, and this is going to be the second one with index 1. And again here, now we want to start using the key type attribute to define the cardinality of this thickness column. And we do that by just saying key type and defining it as 10. That's going to be the actual cardinality of this column. Perfect, so we have the schema. So now we just want to load that data, and then once we've done that, we want to assert that this column that is created based on this thickness property has the cardinality of 10. So the best way to do this in machine learning or in software engineering is copy paste. So we'll copy paste this call right here, which is going to fetch and load data and create ML context for us. In our case, we want the breast cancer data here. So we'll do that. And we can then go ahead and also use the same method for loading the data, just to make it easy for us. Perfect. And in our case, the schema is not going to be the Irish public get properties, it's going to be breast cancer input model. And this can just be called data. Perfect. So with this simple lines of codes here, we have fetched our data and using our schema that we have. And hopefully what's going to happen now is that the underlying column in this data view here is going to have key count of 10. And we can do that by just checking the data by data, schema, fetching the second column with index 1, and type, I believe, get key count. And this method right here is going to hopefully return 10 for us. And we can use the n-unit assert here, sorry, x-unit here for assert equal. And in our case, we expect 10, so we can do u int here. I think it's a long actually. Expected count 10, 10, 10. And I believe that's supposed to work. Let's see if it wants to build. Takes a little while right now. My IntelliSense is not so quick, but I think that's going to be just fine. So as you can see here, what we've done here is we fixed the code and we added a unit test to this code. And if we execute this test, I'm pretty certain it's going to pass, and if not, we should have to figure out what's wrong here and resolve it. So once we have done that, what we do then is we create a branch on our repo, giving it a good name, and we go to the repo and open a new PR. That's what we did yesterday. We opened a PR here for our change. In our case, it's called use key type attribute from schema in create text loader. And what you want to do here is you want to make sure you mark your PR with which issue it fixes. So in our case, it was 2642, and by using the syntax, it's going to create a link to this issue. And then you want to define a quick and easy description on what this PR is trying to resolve. Once you've done that and create a real PR, it's going to kick off the CI pipeline for the repo, and you're going to automatically request a review. And fortunately for me, I've had Eric review this yesterday and today, and he suggested some improvements, some comments, and we have fixed those, and he has now approved this PR. So in not too long time, and with a very supportive process, we have been able to resolve an issue in the repo, fixed it, opened a PR, and done some good deeds here. So I think this is awesome. I had a great time yesterday on the stream together with folks from Netherlands and South Africa and India and elsewhere. And I hope we can continue doing this going forward in future streams. I also hope that you all want to help out and contribute to the repo. There are a lot of places you can get started. There is documentation issues, which are more easily solvable, I guess. There are also simple issues up for grabs and so forth. So definitely check it out and have a look. And if you like